Hello everyone. Today I'd like to talk a little bit about something called deplatforming. Wikipedia defines deplatforming as a verb, which means to prevent someone from utilizing a platform to express their opinion. In effect, this is a powerful means of gagging someone, primarily on the internet, but also in person. However, deplatforming comes in more forms than you might think, and I believe that it's actually one of the most insidious threats facing democracy today. Thankfully, cryptocurrency might be able to do something about this. One of the main things that drew me to Bitcoin in the first place is that it's fundamentally pro-free speech. If you think about it, any decentralized system is purposefully difficult or impossible for one party to impose its will onto. Cryptocurrency can do quite a lot to protect unpopular speech, which is, by the way, the only speech that needs protecting, by allowing people to bypass payment processors who otherwise might deplatform people. As you can see, this kind of financial deplatforming has been happening for quite a while. Now, this is just one kind of deplatforming, but it's one of the worst. Independent journalists and activists often profit from their work. They have to because they spend quite a lot of time on it. The most effective and far-reaching individuals do this sort of thing as a full-time job. So if you want to shut one of these people up, all you really have to do is figure out a way to stop them from profiting. Cut their paycheck, and then they can't pay the rent anymore. They're going to have to get a regular job, and they'll shut their mouths. Now, if this sounds unethical to you, if it sounds wrong, if it sounds fundamentally against what America stands for, then we're on the same page. Unfortunately, payment platforms are all too willing to kick people off of their services for having the wrong opinions. PayPal is particularly guilty of this lately. However, there are other forms of deplatforming. There are a host of companies that more or less control 99% of speech on the internet. If these companies work together, they have the ability to effectively shut just about anybody up. Now, these guys often have the same parent companies, but even if they don't, it doesn't really matter. They've demonstrated a willingness to work together to deplatform people who have the wrong opinions. I often hear people suggest that these companies are private entities. They can do what they want, right? It's the free market, right? Well, not really. Let me read this quote that might put this whole thing in perspective. Google has a dominance of the search market that approaches 90% or more in many markets, and between them, Google and Facebook receive 90% of all new advertising dollars spent on the web. Facebook and Google capture 71% of all digital ad spending in Europe. As you can see, the math adds up to a fairly terrifying situation. Right now, a few companies have an effective monopoly on internet speech. These are the gatekeepers, and they're not above working together. We're no longer talking about normal private entities. We're talking about the 21st century equivalent to the Bell system. We're talking about the most important modern public spaces under the iron-fisted control of hectoring, censorship-loving tyrants and ideologues. In recent news, Alex Jones has been thrown off just about every single platform available to him. Now, the idea that this wasn't done in a planned manner seems totally asinine to me. Here you've got major corporations colluding to eliminate one man's speech. Is this really something that we should just accept? Now, you may think that Jones is a kook. He says a lot of crazy stuff. But it doesn't really matter. He's not breaking the law here. He shouldn't be silenced. You need to be worried about this even if you hate this guy, because you know what? You could be next. You probably will be next. The proper answer to speech is more speech. That's probably the central tenet of the United States of America, and if you're American and you think otherwise, what are you doing in this country? Why don't you move somewhere that doesn't respect freedom of speech like we do? It's clear that you don't want to be here. Don't change America into what it's not. As I've said before, I've dedicated my life to fighting censorship in whatever way I can. If you're like me, you're not very interested in crying about the problem, you're more interested in finding real ways to help fix it. But this is a big issue, it's a big problem, and it's difficult for one man to fix all on his own. I don't know the best strategy for dealing with these huge tech companies that don't respect our rights. and have the ability to decide what we can and cannot say on the internet. I do know there are some options. The first of which is that you can build and use alternatives. There's BitChute as a replacement for YouTube. There's Vote as a replacement for Reddit. Gab as a replacement for Twitter, and so on and so forth. I think that cryptocurrency will play a very big role in this. Just look at Steemit if you don't believe me. Now, everything I just said, all those sites, they're great, but they're ways of bypassing the existing system. This is parallel infrastructure, and while I think it's really important, it's also important to remember that the reason that we have to build these platforms and use these platforms that respect freedom of speech is that the existing platforms have market dominance that approaches 100%. They control speech on the internet, which means that we can't just abandon the idea of using these existing platforms and working within these existing platforms to make a difference. So what I'm really saying here is don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. You've got your Reddit account, you've got your Twitter account, you've got all this stuff. You don't have to delete them, you don't have to stop using these platforms. But what you should do is you should raise some awareness on those platforms about how insidious those platforms are. Use them against themselves, so to speak. Let people know that these companies are not respecting their rights. Let people know that alternatives exist, that the option is there. Plant the seed. That's all I'm saying. And in fact, you might be more effective doing that than abandoning those sites altogether. Another way of working within the system is to send letters to advertisers. What you have to understand is that companies like Twitter and Reddit, they make their money through advertising primarily. In fact, that's probably part of the reason why they censor people so heavily, because they have this idea that their advertisers will no longer give them money if they don't shut certain people up. The thing is, we can use that to our advantage. All you have to do is start sending emails or preferably handwritten letters to the people who are giving Twitter and Reddit and so on and so forth money for advertising. Now, this sort of thing takes a bit of research to find out exactly who you should be contacting, and I'll probably be publishing some resources soon to assist with this. But the bottom line is that if enough people let these advertisers know that we won't be buying their products until they get their ads off of Twitter due to the fact that Twitter is censoring people so heavily, well, you might be able to make an impact. Let's leave it at that. Now, there is a third option, which is to somehow get the government to just magically make these problems go away. I would be so excited to see Google, Twitter, Facebook, all these companies just busted up into dozens of small entities. It would be great. I would just laugh and probably throw a party. However, I don't know about you. I don't really trust the government to do anything for me. I think that probably the only thing that they could do right is protect us from a foreign invasion, and everything else they're going to screw up one way or another. They might even screw that up. Who knows? So I wouldn't hold your breath on that. However, I have seen mention of an executive order that might go through soon. Now, if that executive order actually goes through, okay, cool. Maybe there'll be an investigation. Maybe something will change. But again, I don't really trust the government. I think that when it does change things, that change is glacial at best. We can expect this to go on for quite some time. We can expect Google to control the internet for quite some time alongside its cohorts. So what I'm saying is that as free speech enthusiasts, we need to be proactive, okay? The thing is that free speech people tend to lose these engagements because we're by nature not busybodies. We're not trying to police other people's speech, we're just trying to live our lives. Unfortunately, if we want to live in a world where people are able to say what they want on the internet, we're going to have to work for it. And this is the most crucial thing in 2018 because these are the public spaces. This is where popular opinion is determined and debated. And right now, debate isn't really allowed. Only certain opinions are allowed on the internet right now. It's very insidious. So here's the bottom line. If you're a free speech enthusiast like me, go about your business on the internet. But do it in a way that's as helpful as possible to alternative platforms and as unhelpful as possible to existing platforms. That's what I'll be doing. And until next time, I am signing out.